Abortion. I'm 24 years old, and I've just discovered, entirely by accident, that I'm 5 weeks pregnant in. I keep repeating that phrase to myself. I'm 5 weeks pregnant, as though it might change into something else if I say it often enough. It happened despite precautions, which makes it feel even more surreal. Not long ago, my boyfriend and I were joking about how neither of us wanted kids yet, especially given the path we're on. We were careful. I took a plan B after a small mishap, and he's had doctors tell him that his fertility might be severely lowered thanks to a sports injury years back. Looking back, I suppose we both got a bit too comfortable with the idea that the odds of pregnancy were basically nil. Then I woke up one morning, feeling queasy in a way that was different from any ordinary stomach bug, and here I am, sitting on my couch, staring at a positive test. It's funny to me how something so small, a faint line on a white strip, can launch an avalanche of thoughts and emotions. There's a sense of unreality. I can't stop looking at the test, letting the gravity of it sink in. Part of me registers excitement. Another part feels raw panic, and overshadowing everything is a dull sense of now. What? I hadn't expected my life to pivot like this. Not at this age. Not with so many unanswered questions about who I want to be. I always told myself that if I got pregnant at the wrong time, I'd terminate it. My thinking was practical. Finances, career, life, readiness. I come from a family that treats the idea of a child out of wedlock as scandalous, borderline shameful. My mother is so old-fashioned that she freaks out if I spend the night at my boyfriend's place without a ring on my finger. My father, if we're being honest, is more hands-off, but I'm pretty sure he also wouldn't love the idea of me having a child before I'm settled in a stable job, let alone married. But it's not just family expectations that weigh on me. I'm also in a strange place internally. I don't know what I wanted to do career-wise. I've been toying with going back to school. For the past couple of years, I've jumped between part-time gigs and contract work, scraping by but never really feeling anchored. My boyfriend is somewhat more stable, with a reasonable salary, but we're not exactly financially flush. We share an apartment with just enough space for us, and no one else. The idea of shifting that arrangement to include a baby, daycare costs, lost hours of work, the fundamental restructuring of daily life, stuns me. I can't imagine how I'd handle it without slipping into a meltdown. Still, I also have this dream, one that's been with me forever, of being a mother. I've pictured it in different forms over the years, the scenario shifting with my changing fantasies. Sometimes I imagine a cozy suburban house with a yard, me older and calmer, cooking dinner, while a toddler plays on the floor. Other times, I see myself in a city apartment, balancing graduate school with raising a bright, curious child. But in all these daydreams, there's an air of readiness, like I'd have a plan, or at least a firm sense that yes, this is the moment. Right now, that sense of readiness is nowhere in sight. Instead, I feel cornered by an unexpected reality that might force me into decisions I haven't mentally prepared for. My boyfriend tries to be supportive. The day we found out, I handed him the pregnancy test with a trembling hand, and he stared at it as if it was the result for some arcane science experiment. For a moment, he said nothing. I could see about half a dozen expressions flicker across his face. Astonishment, confusion, a pinch of excitement, fear. Then he hugged me and said, "We'll figure this out." That was both reassuring and, ironically, not very helpful. Because what does figure this out mean concretely? Are we going to call the clinic tomorrow? Are we going to start discussing baby names? We're like two amateur actors stepping onto a stage we never auditioned for. So now I'm stuck in a mental loop. 1 minute, I'm leaning toward termination, because the thought of upending my already wobbly life feels unbearable. The next minute, I'm overwhelmed by guilt. I feel this weird emotional bond that might be forming, like the faintest maternal tug at the edges of my mind. I keep telling myself it's only 5 weeks, tiny, invisible, still barely more than a cluster of cells. But then a pang of doubt hits me. What if this is my one chance? My parents were older when they had me, and there's a family history of fertility struggles. My mother had miscarriages, my grandmother had complicated pregnancies, and my boyfriend was told he had low fertility. The irony is that, for all we know, this might be some cosmic fluke, a once-in-a-lifetime event that might never happen again. I keep picturing the face of my family if I announced I was pregnant. My mother's shock or disapproval. My father's stoic expression that might hide dismay or a reluctant acceptance. My extended family's chatter about, "Why aren't you married yet?" Or, A child deserves a stable home. Then there's my own sense that I'm not an adult enough to handle this. I'm 24, yes, which is technically an adult, but I still feel like a child in many ways, uncertain about my path, easily overwhelmed by stress, prone to the occasional meltdown over small inconveniences. Could I handle a pregnancy, a baby, the postpartum period, the toddler years, all that with no stable career? On top of that, what about postpartum depression or physical complications? I have no illusions that it's easy. I've seen friends with newborns practically lose themselves in the chaos. Yet, I also recall a memory from childhood. Maybe I was around 10 when I held my newborn cousin for the first time. I remember how her tiny fingers curled around my thumb, how I felt this surge of protectiveness and awe. Something in me recognized the wonder of a new life. Even now, that memory surfaces and stirs a yearning for that closeness. Then again, that's a fleeting moment. The day-to-day reality is infinitely more complicated. None of this is made easier by the strong stance I've always had on reproductive rights. I've always considered myself staunchly pro-choice, believing it's a woman's right to decide, and being quite certain that if I were ever faced with an unplanned pregnancy at the wrong time, I'd choose an abortion. But life has a way of calling our bluffs, doesn't it? Now that I'm actually in those shoes, I find it's not purely a logical calculation. There's an emotional dimension I didn't fully anticipate. Even though I remain fiercely protective of the right to choose, I'm discovering that the choice itself can be agonizing. I also worry about my mental health. On one hand, continuing the pregnancy might overwhelm me financially, psychologically, and physically. On the other, having an abortion might result in a guilt or grief that I can't entirely predict. I've known people who breezed through an abortion with minimal emotional after effects, and others who wrestled with regret or sadness for years. I don't know where I'd land on that spectrum. Already I feel a swirl of depression creeping in. The thought of staying pregnant intensifies it, and the thought of terminating intensifies it too, just in a different way. I confided in one close friend, someone who's pro-choice but also strongly maternal. And she told me, ultimately, you have to do what resonates with your gut, not just your head, because either path has consequences. She means well, but it's not exactly a magic answer. Another friend, who is child-free by choice, says, if you're hesitating, that means you probably shouldn't have a baby. People who are ready typically know, but is that always true? Maybe some people are never fully ready, yet they adapt once the baby arrives. And then there's the faint voice in me that wonders if I'll hate myself for passing up this chance to experience motherhood, if it's as precarious a possibility as I fear. Sometimes I spiral into daydreams about being a single mother if my boyfriend chooses not to stay, or if it doesn't work out. That scenario is terrifying. How to juggle childcare, education, a career, all while lacking a stable support system. My mother was a workaholic single mom, and I saw how it tore her apart from the inside, though she never admitted it. Do I want to risk repeating that? My boyfriend, for his part, says he'll stand by me regardless, but I can sense his own fear. We're not precisely living in prosperity. Occasionally, I imagine telling my mother. She might press me to keep it, or maybe she'd say something else, but in the end, I know she'd harp on the shame of not being married. My father, I have no clue how he'd react. Then there's me, who has to decide whether to bring a child into a situation that's shaky. The future feels like a swirling unknown. At night, I lie awake, trying to conjure what life looks like in a year if I choose option A, continue, feces. Option B, terminate. Neither path is obviously correct. Both have emotional tolls, potential regrets, or potential reliefs. In fleeting moments of clarity, I reflect on what I truly desire, stripped of fear or external pressure. Sometimes I see that I'm not psychologically or financially prepared for a child, that I need a more stable sense of self before being responsible for another life, and that an abortion might be the more merciful route for both me and a potential child. On the flip side, I also sense a longing to experience motherhood eventually, to break certain cycles, to create a more loving environment than the one I had. If this pregnancy is some cosmic luck, especially given my boyfriend's supposed low fertility, maybe it's meant to be. Then I swirl back into anxiety, suspecting that meant to be is too flimsy a rationale for such a massive decision. I know how final abortion can be, but also, a baby is final in its own way. Once you have a child, you can't just go back to life before. Every day I walk around with this knowledge in my gut. I'm pregnant right now. My body feels foreign, slightly nauseous. My chest is sore. My emotions are near the surface. I want to cry at random intervals. Is that maternal instinct or just hormones? Hard to say. I can't stand it when acquaintances brush it off as just hormones, because they don't see the deeper existential questions swirling in me. Time is ticking too. 5 weeks is still early, but the window for abortion in many places can be complicated by legal restrictions, scheduling constraints, and the shift from a medical abortion to a surgical one if I wait too long. The knowledge that if I decide on an abortion, I shouldn't delay adds urgency, but also pressure. Meanwhile, if I want to keep it, I have to start thinking about prenatal care, vitamins, doctor visits. I vacillate between these two paths. I sense that no matter what, I'll have some regrets or lingering doubts. If I continue the pregnancy, maybe I'll resent the lost years of carefree life, or the educational and career chances I might have to sideline. If I terminate, maybe I'll be haunted by the thought that I let fear overshadow what could have been a fulfilling chapter. Each path has unknown joys and unknown sorrows. People might say, you can always have another kid later when you're ready, but that assumes everything lines up again. No guarantee in life, especially with health concerns or fertility issues. Each day that passes, I keep scanning myself for clarity. It comes in flashes, like a wave of relief when I consider not having to face a future with a baby I can't support, or a pang of sadness when I think about letting go of a potential child who might have been the center of my world. My boyfriend tries to be a rock, telling me, I'll support whatever you choose. That's kind of him, but it also leaves the decision entirely on my shoulders, which is simultaneously appropriate. It's my body, and burdensome. I sometimes wish someone would make the decision for me, but that just robbed me of my agency. So I remain stuck in this mental tug-of-war. One piece that annoys me is how so many external voices might chime in if they knew. My extended family, random pro-birth acquaintances, co-workers. They'd each have an opinion, projecting their own moral, religious, or personal stances onto me. I resent the idea that my private situation could become a battleground for others' beliefs. That's partly why I keep it quiet. Only my boyfriend and a couple close friends know. I don't need the moral noise. My internal noise is enough. I try to remember that ultimately, it's me who will bear the consequences. If I keep the pregnancy, I'm the one whose body changes, whose finances get impacted, who deals with postpartum, who might have to sacrifice certain freedoms. If I don't, I'm the one who must live with the knowledge that I ended a potential life. It's a deeply personal calculus. No one else can do that math for me. People might judge me, but that's secondary to the reality that I'm the one who wakes up every morning to face the outcome. And I wish I had a neat wrap-up, a eureka moment, where I realize exactly what to do. But the truth is, I'm still lost, pacing around the apartment, rechecking that positive test as if it might spontaneously reverse. The swirl in my head hasn't settled. Maybe I'll talk to a professional, someone who can walk me through the medical and emotional aspects, without pressuring me. Maybe I'll ask my mother or father in a moment of desperation, although that might cause more tension. Or maybe I'll quietly make an appointment with a clinic, see how it feels to step through that door, and if it feels right or not. In the meantime, I linger in this emotional limbo, feeling both attached and detached from this new reality inside me. I resent the pressure from intangible societal norms, from family's disapproval, from my own perfectionism. I resent the fact that I even have to weigh, could I handle the guilt against, could I handle being a mom? But that's the situation. No matter what, I'll emerge changed. If I end the pregnancy, it'll be an experience that shapes me, an acceptance that this wasn't the time. If I continue, I'll confront an entirely different life trajectory, possibly discovering strengths or weaknesses I didn't know I had. In either case, it's not a trivial choice. People sometimes reduce it to black and white, but living it is messy. I want to remind myself that I'm a human being who can only do so much child. I can't predict every future regret or outcome, and the best I can do is try to be honest with myself about what I'm ready for and what I'm not, emotionally and practically. Maybe it helps to remember that so many women have been in my exact spot, grappling with the same heartbreak and fear. They survived one way or another, forging a path that made sense for them. For now, I keep the conversation open with my boyfriend. We ask each other questions like, where do we see ourselves in 6 months if we do X or U? Sometimes we talk about it calmly. Other times we're tense and tearful, but it's better than stifling it. Meanwhile, I'm trying to find small moments of calm, reading a book, taking a walk, letting my mind wander, because the looming question can feel suffocating if I focus on it 24/7. Part of me wants to approach this with compassion for that fragile potential life, but also for myself, the person who never asked to be put in this position. I'm reminded that life doesn't always line up neatly, that we can do everything right or think we have a plan, and then the universe tosses a curveball. Maybe the ultimate lesson is about kindness toward oneself, about acknowledging the complexity of being human, because I'm human, with a heart and mind that's trying to do its best under imperfect conditions. I will honor that, whichever path I choose. That's the story. A swirl of contradictory feelings in the wake of an unexpected pregnancy. No neat resolution, no tidy moral, just the raw experience of someone faced with a life-altering fork in the road.